Welcome to AgriUT Conversations podcast. Welcome to AgriUT Conversations podcast, a space where inspirational leaders meet to discuss challenges and solutions our planet and its people face today. We intend to capture these conversations to increase awareness, encourage engagement, and inspire others to follow in the steps of these leaders striving to make the world a better place. Today, we have the pleasure of hosting our final episode of the series, and I invite Mark Tsang and Dr. Stewart McGlashan to discuss the emerging and ever-evolving topic of carbon credits. Dr. Stewart is the director of AgriUT Foundation, an experienced professional operating in a global capacity within agribusiness, food, energy, and environmental sectors. He has worked for an international think tank focused on advocacy, knowledge sharing, and sovereign state policy in energy security and climate change mitigation. And he has multiple certifications and qualifications, including an MBA in business administration, a PhD in chemical engineering, a diploma as a company director, and a Bachelor of Engineering. Then we have Mr. Mark, who combines a strong interest in the use of blockchain and artificial intelligence in addressing some of the world's most pressing problems, an extensive career in corporate financial markets technology, and a Master's of Sustainable Development from the University of London. Mark is currently researching the ability of blockchain to bridge the challenges faced by smallholder farmers in carbon market application. So now that we've been introduced to these special guests with their amazing profiles, I'll hand over the mic to start the conversation. Thank you so much for joining today, gentlemen. How are you guys doing?
Going great, and really happy to be here, Carmen, and talking to Stuart as well about this very topical subject. You know, it's carbon credits is in the news a lot. People are very getting a lot of focus on it, and the plight of smallholding farmers is raising up in a global discourse as well. So I think, needless to say, blockchain is on a lot of people's lips and has been since 2007. So it's a great topic to talk about the intersection of all three.
Yes,
It's
highly relevant, and it's the influence that it can have on our ability to mitigate some of the issues going on at the moment, and future challenges in the environment is front and center. No doubt about it.
Definitely. And I think, a great place to start for any of our listeners that might be new to this topic, because I think there are a lot of people still learning about what exactly are carbon credits. Could one of you please do a quick introduction? Like, what are carbon credits and why is it important for people to care about in this day and age?
Stuart, do you want to go ahead with that?
Sure. Okay. So carbon credits are typically a method of accounting for emissions, and it's a carbon dioxide equivalent emission, and it's designed to assist us with understanding how we as humans impact the environment through our energy consumption and our food production systems, and the carbon credit itself is equivalent to 1 ton of carbon dioxide equivalent in size, and the credit is usually generated when you abate carbon, or you use a method for reducing the amount of carbon that you are consuming to a level so that you have this difference between where you were and where you are, and that can be called a carbon credit, per se. Now, Mark, did you want to add anything from your perspective?
Yeah, thanks, Stuart. Look, and I think the uses of carbon credits is usually large companies want to consume carbon credits to add to the story of their carbon or environmental accounting that is becoming more and more to the fore of the business world. So we have a lot of environmental sustainability and governance, ESG questions, Lots of large companies are striving to adhere to ESG and environmental and governance objectives that they have, and some companies may be, or many companies might be, subscribing to a net zero type of approach for themselves and for their companies, for their customers as well. They use carbon credits as part of that accounting to offset some of the emissions that they cannot reduce themselves, or are difficult to reduce at this point in time, or are too expensive to reduce at this kind of time, at this point in time. So the carbon credits can be used to offset the carbon footprint of large companies, or even individuals as well, but mainly large companies. And in particular, it's relevant to us, to AgriUT and to AgUnity, is the voluntary carbon market. So we generally have two types. One is a compliance one that are run by governments and national entities and boards. They have a stricter set of rules. And then there's the voluntary one that lots of companies voluntarily subscribe to and try to consume carbon credits in that space. And they have the voluntary carbon market has a lesser extent of set of rules. And so that's become quite a topical discussion at the moment.
Mm. Yeah, I guess wherever there's less rules, there's more room for mistake and for freedom of movement. So you've got to control that a little bit and see how that impacts the greater environmental picture of carbon credits. So it's sounding like you said, it's for mostly at a company level to offset the carbon footprint of large companies, but it can also be applicable to individuals. How would it work for an individual if they wanted to offset their carbon footprint?
Yeah, and and I can start on that one, Carmen. I think it's at the moment with the my studies looked at the voluntary carbon market and the characteristics of that market at the moment that really work towards hindering and precluding a smaller participants in that market, be they individuals that want to buy carbon credits to offset their own individual personal footprint, or be they smallholding farmers that want to participate as producers of carbon credits and supplying into that market. So there are certain characteristics of the voluntary carbon market that really go towards hindering that, and we can talk more about that later if we want. But this is where, and I hope I'm not jumping the gun here in our discussion, but this is where I think blockchain comes in to be able to facilitate that inclusion of individuals, and also the inclusion of smallholding farmers as well, to be able at both ends, on the supply side and the demand side of the market. And what it does is that the blockchain can be used to tokenize carbon credits. We can talk more about that as well, such that they become more liquid and more easily accessible to people like myself who want to buy small amounts of carbon credits, such that we can offset the small amount of footprint that I create. Excuse me. But also, the blockchain allows the possibility of much greater programmability and customization, such that people can participate a lot more. And it really opens the door to extend the market participants to the individual consumer, the individual person, and also the individual farmer, smallholding farmer, that might want to collaborate with a small number of farmers to be able to participate in that market in the supply side.
Yeah, this seems to be two key challenges. One is that as a customer, you've got $1 and you want to spend it on a carbon offset or a carbon offset program. How do you do that? Is one of the key questions. So where do you take that $1? Who can actually validly say that what you're purchasing is actually an offset? How do you check that? It's not as if it's like a currency as such, and it's backed by government. It's truly it's not an unregulated market, but it's a voluntary market, and there's different rules in different jurisdictions. On the supply side, where the farmers and participation and so on, it's actually really quite challenging for small guys to participate in these markets, because like you've said in your dissertation, Mark, it's used to big players playing with big players. And so having a small, diffuse, very diffuse source of carbon credits or carbon opportunity for credit and trying to agglomerate those is quite a challenge, because it just doesn't stack up economically for someone to go around and try and verify and validate every single project that's going on at a very small level. And this is where I think the opportunity for us to sort of, or the blockchain technology to participate in this market is critical, because it can link integrity to and agglomerate or aggregate projects and link it to markets that are fairly standard and maybe process that is fairly standard for validation and verification.
Very well said. Very well said. And I think it's so important to find ways for individuals to engage in this, because we're all looking for ways to offset our carbon footprint and do something good. Following on what you just said, Stewart, is there any use cases in the world that are out there that we can kind of demonstrate this in a practical sense for the listeners?
Mark, I don't know about you. I'm not familiar with any at the moment that I'm aware of. I think the voluntary market for natural capital, for carbon offsetting through soils, and to a lesser extent forestry, is still a very young industry, and I don't think we've actually seen the integration of this at all. Mark, do you know?
Yeah, so look, okay, I think we can talk about it in and this is what I discuss in my studies, is in three realms. One is a blockchain realm, one is a smallholder, and one is a carbon market type realm. And there are examples of intersections of any of the two. So we do have examples of smallholding farmers being engaged in the voluntary carbon market, and there are organizations like Plan Vivo that have operate as a registry and also have standards about how to engage smallholding farmers in agroforestry or soil carbon projects to create carbon credits. But like you said, Stewart, it's quite small. It's very small, and I think my rationale is that there are a number of characteristics that smallholder farmers face that limit them, but also to characteristics of their current voluntary carbon market that preclude them. And we also have examples of blockchain intersecting with the carbon market as well. People like Regen Network or KlimaDAO or Nori or Moss, they create tokenized carbon credits as well, and they sell them in a marketplace as well. It's difficult, once again, for them to engage with small players in small holding farmers, because they're really, once again, focused on the large producers as well. And we also have examples of smallholders and blockchain as well, and AgUnity, of course, and AgriUT are right in there as well. But they're more in the examples of the agricultural assets that are transacted on the blockchain. So the approach that I took was looking at that as a parallel, using agricultural assets on the blockchain for smallholding farmers, as a parallel to using environmental assets such as CO2, carbon credits on a blockchain for smallholding farmers, and using that as a parallel where we have evidence of the agricultural assets, using that as a parallel justification for trialing and expanding that with the carbon assets. To my knowledge, and in the checking that I've done, there are no examples of carbon credits produced by smallholding farmers and using a blockchain to support that market. So it really is a niche area, which I think, in my view, has great potential, because there are 500 million smallholding farmers. They up to 2 hectares of land. There's a substantial amount of climate mitigation that can be attributed to the works of smallholding farmers, and the opportunity also too of increasing farmers' incomes through the rising price of carbon credits as well helps benefit transfer both ways. And my argument is that to overcome the limitations of the carbon market and the challenges that smallholders face, blockchain can be that platform in there that helps and actually overcomes those to match those three markets together. So we do have examples, but none of all three. And we still have that situation in the voluntary carbon market where it's splintered and it's really limited to the bigger players, and it's undergoing, I think, quite a bit of change. And last thing I'll say on that is that even now, just this morning, I was reading a paper from Gold Standard, which is a very well-known, very well-regarded registry for the voluntary carbon market. It has released a paper that looking at taking in public comment on its use of digital assets, and more specifically on tokenized digital assets for the carbon credits in its registry. So it's realizing that there's a demand for it. There are benefits to be had in the tokenization of carbon credits, and it's engaging with the carbon credit, the tokenized carbon credit industry, and the carbon credit industry, the carbon market itself, to really, I think, make an advancement towards that. So I think the movement is there. There's quite a bit of movement there, I think, and there's quite a bit of industry pressure to try and digitize and most likely tokenize those carbon credits.
Sure. Stewart, any comments?
Yes, certainly from a regulatory perspective, there's a strong push to digitizing a lot of regulation, a lot of compliance work. And you're seeing that in carbon markets as well as environmental compliance markets in Australia, New Zealand, in the US as well, even in Canada, and countries that have the capability. I think the key challenge, like you said, Mark, is translating some of that technology using blockchain into markets that are challenged by their infrastructure, that are challenged by their size. And become an enabler for the market, for these participants to get into the market. I think the other end of the market will sort itself out in terms of the voluntary offsets. I think there'll be enough pressure from major governments to sort out that voluntary market that there'll be some standardization of that over a very short period of time. The key will be the enabling process, which includes blockchain. It includes the audit, the verification, even just down to like the standard practice, like how does someone participate by improving their soil carbon? What do they actually need to do? And pushing that information through to them, and then pushing out the changes and measuring the changes that they actually are able to measure to say that they've improved.
Fascinating. And I think this is leading nicely into the use case of AgriUT. I've always been fascinated by this concept of a smallholder farmer in the middle of Ethiopia being able to earn extra income by planting trees or doing certain activities and being able to measure that impact that the trees are having, because I think it's the tree height that are certain things that get measured along the way. Maybe you guys can explain a little bit how that would work, of like how AgriUT could offer a use case for these farmers to supplement their income while also contributing to this massive issue of climate change and carbon emissions.
Yeah, I can get started on that, Carmen, and please jump in anytime, Stewart. Look, I think in my brain there are two sides of it. There's the supply side and the demand side, and the supply side is where the smallholder farmers live. They're running an agricultural-based lifestyle, and they're busy and focused on creating their agricultural crops. To be able to participate into to create carbon credits, they need to engage with an organization that has an approved methodology, so an approved process of taking a baseline of where they are now as far as carbon goes, performing actions that will increase the carbon that is stored or taken down out of the atmosphere and stored either in tree biomass or in soils, and then measuring those in a way that can provide enough integrity for outsiders to say, yes, I agree that the actions that they've taken are verifiable, and they're actually, what they say is what's written on the tin. It's drawn down this much carbon dioxide and taken it out of the atmosphere. So the smallholding farmers need to be able to do that, and there are many other processes and tools that they need to be able to make that happen. One of them is that they can store the data. They have to collect a lot of data about where they're at, the baseline, about how they progress going forward, and then also how it's measured and how it's verified as well. That sort of data can be collected via smartphones as well, via remote sensing, increasingly remote sensing, and even satellite type data as well. There's probably a move towards reducing costs of data collection and data verification by digital technologies. That data can be stored in a blockchain because it can be made accessible immediately to everyone. It's transparent. It can be made transparent so that anyone can look at that data and verify that its veracity, verify that's true. And it can also be made immutable so that you can trust it. And this is all about generating the trust in that information and the actions that are taken in the project. Supply side, and that can support farmers very much on the data collection and also the organization of many small holding farms together so that they can create enough size, as Stewart was talking about, to be viable in the current market. The other side is the actual market side, and that's what we were talking about. I was mentioning before about gold standard, looking at the blockchain solutions that can support the market end of the demand side of the market in total. And that's where tokens become more relevant in the ability to move value from the supply side, from the smallholding farmers, to the buyer side, the ones that we're going to want to consume, and also through a system that might include investors, or might include developers, or it might include governments, or it might also include individuals. And the ability of blockchain to take large quantities and make them a lot smaller, we call that fractionalization, and also to make it programmable such that there's a reduced need for people in the middle, such that a transaction can be executed in real time, and a transfer of that carbon credit can move from one entity to another in real time, very quickly, and with low cost. They're the type of attributes that a blockchain entity can bring to this whole carbon market, and thereby include individuals that want to purchase carbon credits, or holding farmers that want to create carbon credits as well, but run into different challenges of the way the carbon market is at the moment.
Okay,
I'll pause there, Stuart, see if you wanted to say anything there.
Yeah, so I think in addition to that, one of the challenges that smallholders face, or anyone faces for that matter, is there's a large startup cost, and there's a long lead time before you can actually get a long lag time maybe before you can actually say you've generated a credit or a partial credit, and that just costs money and time, and it's expensive for people who don't have that. And so I think that's where one of the ways that people can, so consumers rather, or companies can participate in the market early, is by investing in these projects, by pushing that money through the system, through the ecosystem, so that people can invest in the monitoring gear, so they can invest in the change in practice, and they can actually take the time to receive those credits, or generate those credits. Because it's can be like, even on a large project, from start to finish, you're looking at probably years, and it's certainly the cycle will be seasoned at the very least for producers. And so that, I think, is a very important part of the overall program, is actually being able to front load or at least reduce the cost of participation at the very start, so your farmers aren't in deficit in terms of economic cost. I think that's an important part of it as well.
And is that where the token comes into it? Is it because the money that consumers or donors would put towards the project, would that token then be provided to the farmer, the AgriUT token be provided to the farmer in exchange for their efforts, and they can then use that in the community? Or how is that looking like it would work?
Yeah, and I think, Carmen, that's a great example, and I think just looking at the principles of it, the possibilities and the opportunities of using AgriUT as a token, as a utility token, to support the efforts that farmers themselves make in climate mitigation is really only limited by the imagination, and that's part of the characteristics and the attractiveness of why blockchain and tokenization has these possibilities, because tokens become a digital representation of a carbon credit. They can be made into smaller portions, fractionalized. They can be programmed, and they can be used as building blocks for many ideas. So, and this is where I think the tokenization industry is really at the moment, is really coming up with these great ideas. It needs regulation, as Stewart said, to support it, and it needs industry also to support it. But I think that's the real next phase of what's going to be coming through. In our particular situation with AgriUT, it's a reward token at the moment. Its current life is a reward token. So it can be used to reward farmers for their efforts that they put into carbon projects. And that reward can be used at different stages, whether, as Stewart said, is meeting the upfront initial funding for a project. That's a very real challenge for smallholding farmers, whereas large participants have those resources to be able to absorb the initial funding hit. Smallholding or an amalgamation of smallholders find that difficult, and that's a limitation, so overcoming that will be able to attract more smallholding farmers in that. So, if we think of it as AgriUT as like a loyalty reward program, similar to Flybys or excuse me, or a Woolworths reward program, loyalty or transact or purchases via that reward program generates these reward tokens. So, for example, AgriUT in this case. So you could be a coffee buyer, for example, that purchases a certain brand of coffee that supports AgriUT, and you earn these AgriUT reward tokens. Another alternative is you can buy the AgriUT reward tokens by themselves directly. Those reward tokens can be transferred over to, and the value that they bring can be transferred and used over into supporting smallholding farmers for their agricultural efforts, which is currently what we do, or what is done, but also for their climate mitigation efforts. And so the farmers can then use those AgriUT tokens to support their efforts, whether it be via getting a digital phone, an AgUnity digital phone that helps their transactions, helps their data recording for the climate actions, or it helps them in other ways that might be able to acquire different equipment or services that they need to be able to run their carbon project. And I see that reward system helps the value flow through the efforts from the smallholding farmers and eventually into the community that they live in. It helps the value flow through them and helps them achieve their goals, helps them achieve their agricultural goals, helps them achieve their social goals, and then helps them achieve their climate goals as well, which are our climate goals. So consumers might be able to acquire AgriUT and want to support climate mitigation, which is one of the greatest challenges that we face in our times, that affects everyone no matter where they live. And they want to support smallholding farmers doing that. And this is the way that they can do that.
Fantastic explanation. Would you like to add anything, Stewart?
No, I think in that instance, it's Mark said it very well.
Yeah, said very well. And I just wanted to check, there's one question I had around milestones and the rewarding of farmers, because it's really incredible that you provide a consumer the opportunity to, say thank you and give something of value to these farmers that work so hard. They could be rewarded at different milestones. What are the types of milestones that they would get the rewards at?
Well, it depends on what sort of project you've got, but just say you've got a soil carbon project, which is probably the most likely that you'll see in this sort of environment. You'd work it on an annual cycle or a seasonal cycle, where you'd have devices that would fit into your smartphone. Like, it's amazing what you can actually get now that can be used to measure on a smartphone things like carbon or moisture or protein, whatever you're trying to measure, and then you'll do that through your phone. It's verified through your phone. It's verified by GPS and also the location by you geotag your phone or make sure the phone knew exactly where you were when you're doing it, and potentially even take a photo of it, and that all becomes the evidence required for a verification step. So a step of actually like an audit. So someone can go and say, okay, I can see that this carbon is improved by this much. I can see that this is the photo before, this is the photo after, this is the location and so on. And I can also see maybe via satellite or through other means that's also the case as a third point of verification. The key will be, in terms of milestones, they've got to be agreed. They've got to be in cycle with expectations both in the market but also with the producer. We really got to make sure it suits the farmer, because there's no point in having a system in place where the key milestone is out of sync. You've got to make it work for them first, and then let the market tokenize it up and push it on from there. Because I think the demand is constant, but the supply is going to be seasonal in this instance.
Yeah.
And can I add on that too, Carmen, before we move on, is that one of the things that I love about, this is a use case that we have that has AgriUT and AgUnity have come together and put together, and they can see how it would work, and they can see the great value in it. But really, like I said before, the opportunities are there. The capabilities are really limited only by the imagination. So this is where things can come in, where combined with the customizability of the blockchain through through smart contracts, for example, that you can really tailor a solution to fit an individual problem. So smallholding farming communities are not the same worldwide. They're different between countries, different within countries. They have their different sets of problems. Some are farther down the development stage than others, and hitting each nail, very dissimilar nail, with the same hammer, leads to kind of poor results in some instances. But with the ability to customize for that particular community or that particular region, really enables the blockchain solution to be tailor-made to fit those people and the challenges that they face, whether they be environmental challenges, whether they be governmental challenges, legislative, whether they be infrastructure challenges, such that they don't have telecommunications, or they don't have road infrastructure and supply problems, or whether they be market problems, and that the solution can be made to fit each and every one. And they start from similar base, but then customizing it really helps to address those. And so, for example, we've just talked about the use case that we might have now, but consumers might use AgriUT as a forward purchase mechanism to be able to say, hey, look, we want to reward the farmers now. And as Stewart said, it can be years before verified carbon credits are generated in a soil carbon project. The rewarding can be done now, and when those carbon credits are generated, then the consumers that have rewarded through AgriUT may be able to be rewarded back with a portion of a carbon credit or some sort of some sort of certificate or some sort of a gamified a method to say that, you have been some sort of recognition for their contribution that might have been done a year before, 5 months before, 2 years before. So really, there are plenty of ideas, and it would be a great exercise to see that the community that listens to this podcast, what ideas that they come up with, what suggestions that they might have to see from their knowledge and their specific knowledge of how these solutions can be targeted to fix those problems.
Yeah, certainly. I can do a wrap up of that. Do you have anything to add, Stewart?
No, I think that's about right. Like, the key for me has always been like there's a layer of creativity that we have no idea what the limit is. It's like when mobile phones were first produced, no one thought would be here now, and that's just one of those things. And then, but the value is, from a regulatory perspective, is that you've got this traceable system that works, and the system can be adapted to the environment. The system can be adapted to the regulation, but it's there to facilitate participation by farmers, and that's the value of it. And and so it's about getting that, maybe making that enabler, getting that enabler deployed, getting that enabler recognised as a method for dealing with climate change mitigation, and recognised in common markets. And some of that is literally going to, unfortunately, be a little bit of a tick box from our perspective and what we have to do. But the rest is all down to how we get that information out to both the markets, the consumer, and the producer, like the farmer themselves.
Yeah, definitely. And it's early days, right? Early days, it's a niche market. There's a huge opportunity, but there's lots of work and advancements that need to happen, which is exciting, but does need the community to move forward. So what's next? Like, what do you think's next for AgriUT, but in general, the carbon markets, like what's your professional opinion on what we have to see coming for this industry?
Let me go first on that one, and then we can go to Stewart as a director of the AgriUT Foundation with a much better insight on what the futures and directions would be. But I think there are still challenges that the voluntary carbon market faces. One of them, which is really topical at the moment, is integrity. So being able to trust, and the criticisms that have come out of the voluntary carbon market about creating carbon credits that have no environmental integrity, creating carbon credits that really go to support only the big end of financial town, so making the rich get richer and furthering the inequality there. Those kind of criticisms need to be addressed well to be able to satisfy everyone that this is a viable method to finance climate mitigation. And there are a number of bodies that are actually actively working on it and producing standards and guidance right now to be able to make the voluntary carbon market much more trustworthy and increase the integrity. And some of those are the Science Based Targets Initiative and the Voluntary Carbon Market Integrity Initiative, and there are a number of others as well. And these are large multinational, multilateral organizations that really feed into the drive from the United Nations on and the Paris Agreement, Article 6, based on the voluntary carbon market, or the carbon markets itself, on trying to support that. And we've seen from the UN level that there's a real drive and support for the carbon market. Despite some people's criticism of using a financial tool to be able to tackle an environmental problem, I believe that the world, from the UN down, is going to be using this voluntary carbon markets for a long time to come, to be able to to be able to transfer finances towards the actual mitigation efforts, the projects that will draw down carbon out of the atmosphere. And I think it's a worthwhile endeavor to pursue. So I think, and also with the recent push on the digitization of the voluntary carbon markets. The example I gave was a recent one by Gold Standard. I think that is actually going to come to the fore very, very, very quickly, and that will actually help address some of the questions about inclusion of the individual into the carbon market, being able to purchase carbon credits just like any individual can go to the Australian Stock Exchange and buy stocks in a company. Not that the carbon credits necessarily are equities, but it's that ease of access that allows that we need to have in the voluntary carbon market. I think that's coming very, very quickly. And also at the other end, about allowing small holding farmers to participate as well. I think those barriers are going to be knocked down quite quickly, and the opportunity that smallholder farmers collectively, globally, offer is going to be realized. And so, and the mutual benefits or the co-benefits will be seen very clearly. And so I think it's a space that's moving forward, very fast. I think carbon prices have increased a lot in the last 12, 18 months, 2 years, and will further increase. And I think that all jurisdictions, including the Australian jurisdiction, are developing their voluntary carbon market as well as their compliance carbon markets very quickly to be aligned with the push from international governmental desires to be net zero, the claims from companies to be net zero and to follow their ESG requirements. And I think the push of all of those entities and forces, market forces, will then drive the financial side of it, the economic side of it, the prices of carbon credits, and also the consumption of carbon credits to a point that is making good environmental gains. So I think this is an exciting time to be here. It's moving fast, it's moving quickly, and I think really that we'll see a lot of in the next coming years, the next 2 or 3 years, really, a lot of great innovation in the way we address climate action and the way we finance climate action and the way we support the root causes of climate action as well, which may well be addressing the inequality that smallholder farmers are limited by. So I think it's an exciting time.
Well said.
Yeah, so Mark, I think one of the key things also to pick up on is the opportunity for confidence in the market. At the moment, it's a low confidence market, this voluntary market. Like people don't have a lot of confidence, and quite often there isn't not a lot of backing or evidence to support the claims that some of the voluntary markets are saying. And I think this is the opportunity here, that there's already a lot of money heading to smaller communities or to projects in developing countries where from the World Bank and similar, and Asia Development Bank and similar. But the key is how far down can that money go and have the integrity of getting to where it needs to go, and has a project to go to, and it has a system to go to as well in terms of development of carbon credits through soil carbon and so on, and then having a valid result or answer or emissions credit come back out of that system is the key. So there's a lot of money being poured into those already, not into this market necessarily, but into development of sustainable supply chains, sustainable energy, sustainable food production. But not a lot is actually done yet to really wrap that up in terms of, well, how much of a benefit are we actually getting out of this from a climate change mitigation perspective? And I think there's also the opportunity as well.
Mm-hmm. Fascinating. Yeah, well said. And I think, wow, I've just learned so much in this session. Thank you for all your thoughts. I think just to wrap up around the future of carbon credits for AgriUT, like future plans. What do you think, Stewart? What's the plans?
Sure. Like we are very keen to engage with project proponents, but also investors in this space. And so larger entities. We need to get a better handle on how we're going to make sure we've got integrity of our projects. So the verification step in this, as Mark said before, there's a lot of customization that needs to occur in our blockchain technology in order to make it fit the style of projects we need to participate in, and that's both to make it suit the producer or the farmer, and also suit the market. And then ultimately, we'd just like to see the opportunity to build a portfolio of sustainable development projects that give farmers or give customers and consumers an opportunity to participate in, and give farmers an opportunity to also gain benefit from participating.
Yeah, deliver real benefits to these communities and that real connection between the different participants from individual and business level.
That's right.
Great. Wow. Thank you so much for your time, gentlemen. There's lots of other questions I want to ask, but we've definitely gone a bit over time. Thank you for all the information you've shared, and I look forward to having a discussion in the future as this industry progresses, because yes, it's definitely time for it to move it into its next evolution, and there's lots of forces that are moving it towards that. So I look forward to the next conversation we have.
Excellent.
Great. Thanks, Carmen. Thanks, Stewart. Yep.
Thanks, guys.
Thank
Have
you.
a great day. Bye-bye.